Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff, who served on the House January 6th committee and was the lead manager during Trump's first impeachment. So, Congressman Schiff, one, thank you for your time this afternoon. It's so crazy what he's saying, which is why it's so important to point it out. So I really wanted to ask you first, if Trump, what he's calling for here, if this were what were to happen, that there would be no president would be held accountable for their actions, what would that mean exactly?
Well, it is every bit as crazy as it sounds. It means that a president could order the assassination of his political opponents and not be held accountable. It means that a president could threaten the life of a Senate president if they brought impeachment proceedings and not be held accountable. Essentially, it would, to quote Justice Goldberg, it would turn the Constitution into a suicide pact. And the Constitution is not a suicide pact. It doesn't require its own destruction. But to interpret the way Donald Trump would interpret the Constitution, it would nullify any of the protections the American people have from a despot or despotism. I think the tougher question, frankly, the Court of Appeals may have to deal with is, should they decide this before there's a verdict in the case? That may be the closer question. But on the merits of this, is a president immune while in office from being prosecuted for committing crimes when he leaves office? The answer is clearly no. And I think even with the current Supreme Court, they're going to conclude, no, you don't have that kind of immunity.
And even if the courts rule as you just said, and I think that's what a lot of legal experts are suggesting, it still gives us some insight into Donald Trump's thinking, into kind of what he thinks his powers would be if he were president. How does that sit with you, and what should people know about what that reflects?
That's absolutely right. And you'll remember, and I may not have the quote exactly right, but he essentially said that that Article 2 gives him the power to do whatever he wants. As President of the United States, there is no limitation to his power, authority, immunity, or capability to tear down our institutions to do whatever he wants. And this is, quite the terrifying thing about him running for president again, which is he would start from the low point he ended. He would begin, with insurrection. That is, when he started out, he had at least some people of stature. He got rid of them for people of no stature. He got rid of them in turn for people who were utter sycophants. And now there would be no boundaries, no guardrails, no nothing. And he's made it absolutely plain. He'll be dictator on day one, and that's the way he wants it.
And the insight into how he's going to approach this is so important, which is why I wanted to talk to you about it. Now, if you believe the polls, I mean, there was a new poll that came out overnight, an NBC News, Des Moines Register poll, that basically shows that despite all of this, Republican voters in the primary are set to register their approval for Trump. They're set to say, basically, this is his guy, despite all the indictments, his comments about echoing Hitler. I'm just wondering, as we sit here the day before the Iowa caucus, what you make of that and what it tells us about the Republican electorate.
Well, it tells us, I think there's been a real failure of leadership within the Republican Party. These candidates that are running against Trump aren't willing to take him on fully. They're not willing to go after him. They seem to be competing for whoever can come in second, not even with an eye to being his running mate, but with an eye to running 4 years from now. And because none of them are willing to call him out on what he is, which is a profound danger to our country, people, somehow now have normalized his conduct, his behavior. Well, if these others aren't willing to call him out on his 91 felony charges, well, then they must be okay, or they must be something wrong or political about them. So I think there's been a total failure of leadership among the Republican Party. And I also think, though, that in terms of the presidential election and the ultimate general election contest, it's going to be very important for President Biden to continue emphasizing everything he's doing to meet economic challenges Americans are facing. For those who are in the thrall of Donald Trump, they're not going to be persuaded. But there are still millions and millions of people who are undecided, which is remarkable, but it's true. And I think appealing to those voters by meeting, their economic needs for affordable housing, for affordable child care, to rebuild a broadband and infrastructure. These are powerful cases to be made for President Biden to win over, I think, voters who are yet to be decided.
Definitely something, a lot of issues people care deeply about. Now, before I let you go, I did want to ask you about something you've been talking a lot about, which is the fact that Donald Trump has confirmed that foreign governments paid his companies $7.8 million while he was in office. That's just scratching the surface, as you and others have made the point. Of all things to worry about in the second term, we've talked about some of them. Are we underestimating this foreign influence on Trump, or kind of what this desire to make more money on his behalf could mean in terms of his actions in a second term?
I don't think we're underestimating it at all. And I've often thought that the biggest compromise of Donald Trump when it came to Vladimir Putin was Trump Tower, Moscow Trump Tower. This was going to be the most lucrative project of his life. When he was running in 2016, he lied about having business interests in Russia, even while his attorney, Michael Cohen, was on the phone with the Kremlin trying to make that deal happen. His view is that he'd be a fool to criticize Putin or stand up to Putin when he stands to make so much money from that deal. And so, whether it's Moscow Trump Tower or it's money from the Gulf nations, it's always about money with Donald Trump, and always about Donald Trump and not about the national interest. So, yes, these numbers, these emoluments, these rents that he collected from these nations that wanted to curry favor with him while he was president, that is just, I think, the beginning of the kind of grift and graft we would see if he got another chance at office.